Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's get started with today's story. Ethan Caldwell always believed a quiet house meant peace. That's what his grandfather had told him. But over the years, Ethan had learned that silence could also mean something far heavier: distance. Across the kitchen table sat his wife, Lila, her dark hair pinned up, silver bracelet glinting in the morning sun, eyes glued to her phone. She used to chatter endlessly about weekend plans, their dream home, trips they'd take when work slowed. Now the only sound was the faint tapping of her fingers. "Coffee's cold again," Ethan said lightly, trying to sound casual. "I'll warm it later," she murmured, still staring at the screen. He nodded, pretending the sting of indifference didn't pierce him. 3 years ago, she would have laughed at his terrible brewing skills, teased him, kissed his cheek, and rushed off to work. Now, everything about her seemed rehearsed, polite, distant. Ethan worked long hours as a civil engineer in Austin, building high-end homes he could never afford for others. Lila thrived in her marketing career, juggling campaigns and late-night calls. Somewhere between blueprints and conference calls, their rhythm had vanished. He had tried to convince himself it was normal. Marriages go through quiet phases. But lately, it didn't feel like quiet. It felt like absence. That Friday evening, he arrived home earlier than usual, clutching a bouquet of white tulips, her favorite. He remembered the sparkle in her eyes when he'd surprised her with flowers in their first year together. The house was empty. TV off. Lights dim. Lila's car wasn't in the driveway. He stood in the hallway, inhaling the faint scent of her perfume. The flowers trembled slightly in his grip as he placed them on the kitchen counter beside her half-drunk coffee, still warm. Hours later, she returned, her tone flat. "Work ran late." Ethan offered a faint smile. "I saved dinner for you." "I'm not hungry," she said, eyes still fixed on her phone. It hit him not because of her words, but the emptiness behind them. No guilt. No warmth. Just distance. Over the next weeks, he noticed subtle changes. Lila dressed differently, swapped her usual perfume, and her laughter regained a softness that hadn't been there in months. But the hardest part was the way she smiled at her phone. Soft, intimate, private. One evening, Ethan saw her step onto the balcony to take a call, leaning close to someone on the other end. It wasn't professional. Her smile whispered secrets he wasn't meant to hear. Ethan said nothing, because by then he knew something important. When love rots, silence is the thread that holds it together, and that thread was unraveling. Thursday night arrived unusually warm for late April. Ethan was finishing up at the office, his mind restless, when Lila announced she was visiting her mother. "Mom's not feeling well. I'll stay there tonight," she said, dropping her bag casually on the sofa. "Of course," Ethan replied, keeping his voice calm, though a tight knot formed in his chest. She kissed his forehead lightly. "Don't wait up, okay?" The click of her heels on the walkway echoed in the quiet house. Ethan stared at the empty door for a moment, then reached for his phone. It wasn't suspicion driving him, it was instinct. He opened their shared location app, the one they'd agreed on years ago for safety. Her little blue dot wasn't near her mother's home. It blinked across town, at a place Ethan knew well, the Linden Lounge, the same spot where they'd celebrated their second anniversary. A chill ran down his spine. He didn't call. He didn't text. He grabbed his jacket and keys and left quietly. The night air in Austin hummed softly as he parked across the street. Through the tall glass windows, the lounge glowed gold. Jazz music floated into the street, clinking glasses punctuating laughter. And there she was. Lila sat at a corner table, her hand brushing lightly against a man's arm. Tall, sharp-suited, his presence commanding attention. Ryan Harper, her marketing manager. Ethan recognized him immediately. The smile they shared wasn't the casual laughter of colleagues. It was warm, intimate, hidden. Ethan didn't storm in. He didn't shout. He simply watched. In that quiet, something shifted inside him. Proof didn't always scream. Sometimes it arrived as a still, terrible certainty. Driving home later, Ethan's hands rested lightly on the wheel. His mind replayed every missed dinner, every late-night excuse, every soft "you're imagining things." It wasn't imagination anymore. It was clarity. The next morning, Lila breezed into the kitchen, cheerful and oblivious. Ethan met her gaze calmly. "How's your mom?" he asked. "She's fine," she said quickly, blinking. Ethan nodded. "I heard you had dinner with your dad last night. Good to hear she's okay." Lila's hand trembled slightly as she poured coffee. "You must be mistaken." "I'm not," he said quietly. "You don't need to explain. I already know." The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Lila's lips parted, but no words came. Ethan turned away, his voice calm but final. You made your choice last night. Remember, I'll be making mine soon. For the next few days, Ethan moved like a man quietly surveying a battlefield. He didn't confront Lila, didn't argue, didn't shout. He watched, he recorded, he waited. Every little detail started to form a pattern. Dinner dates that worked late conveniently matched Ryan's schedule. Messages deleted too quickly to trace. Photos tagged in places she claimed never to visit. Her laughter, overheard in the hall, carried a warmth reserved for someone else. Ethan wasn't vengeful by nature, but he was methodical. He began collecting proof. Screenshots of location history, receipts from upscale restaurants, even a blurry photo of Lila and Ryan taken by a friend passing by the lounge. Every piece stacked quietly, like bricks forming a wall between truth and illusion. Then came a Friday evening, the moment Ethan had been waiting for. Lila returned home unusually early, her smile rehearsed, her tone soft. "Thought we could have dinner together," she said, testing the waters. "Sure," he replied, not looking up from his laptop. Dinner passed like a fragile ritual. Lila laughed politely, moved her fork, tried to act normal. Then Ethan spoke. "Funny thing," he said casually. "Ryan called me today." Her hand froze over her plate. "What?" He asked about the project you've been working on together. "Lots of overtime lately, right?" Lila swallowed hard, eyes widening. I didn't need to," Ethan said, calm. "But you should know, Lila. Lies have a way of catching up, even in office emails." The color drained from her face. Panic flickered in her eyes, though she tried to hide it. For the first time in weeks, her mask cracked. After dinner, she lingered near the doorway. "Ethan, can we talk?" He didn't look up. "We talked plenty when you said you were at your mother's. You just didn't realize I was listening." Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen." Ethan's expression remained calm, sharp. "Mistakes are forgetting anniversaries. Mistakes are saying sorry once. You lied for months. You made me a fool in my own home. That's not a mistake." Lila sank to the floor, head in her hands, sobbing quietly. Ethan left her there, the lamp casting long shadows across the room. The quiet wasn't emptiness anymore. It was clarity. By morning, Ethan had already begun planning the next step. Revenge, he realized, wasn't loud. It was knowing they could never take that peace, or that truth, back from him. By Monday, Ethan had everything he needed. Not for anger. Not for vengeance. But for truth. Screenshots, receipts, messages, even the photo of Lila and Ryan at the lounge. It all told the story she had tried to hide. Ethan didn't storm into her office or yell. He acted quietly, deliberately. That morning, he drove to her company, Mitchell and Brandt Marketing, envelope in hand. Inside, the timeline, proof of her lies, the restaurant photos, and a simple note: "Professional integrity matters. Thought you should know." He left before Ryan even opened it. Meanwhile, Lila went through her day, unaware of what had been delivered. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. She tried to maintain composure, but the tremble in her hands betrayed her. At home, Ethan moved with calm precision. Breakfast made. Floors swept. Coffee brewed. Every action mundane, yet each one a reminder that life goes on, even when the foundation cracks. By afternoon, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and paled. She tried to speak, but Ethan's quiet presence was enough to stop her. "You did something," she whispered. "I told the truth," he said softly. Her eyes widened, realization dawning. The office whispers, the HR inquiries, Ryan's sudden silence, it all clicked. Lila sank into a chair, shaking. "Ethan. I can fix this. I'll quit. We can go to counseling." He shook his head slowly. "I've already gone through counseling every night you didn't come home. That version of us is gone. You chose lies. You found excitement elsewhere. Now live with it." For the next week, the walls around her life began to crumble. Her position at work was suspended pending review. Ryan stopped answering her calls. Her social circle whispered, and she felt isolated for the first time. At home, Ethan's calm indifference became a mirror she couldn't escape. He still cooked. Still tidied. Still acted polite. But the warmth was gone. Every glance from him reminded her of the betrayal she'd created. One evening, she found him outside fixing the backyard fence. "You can't just ignore me forever," she said, voice quivering. He didn't look up. "I'm not ignoring you. I'm not pretending anymore." Tears streamed down her face. "I made a mistake." Ethan set the hammer down slowly, meeting her gaze. "No. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is lying once. You lied for months. That's not a mistake, it's a choice. She crumpled against the fence, sobbing quietly. He walked past, leaving her in the yard. Silence returned to the house. But this time, it felt right. After Lila left, suitcase in hand, the house finally felt his again. Not empty, but quiet in a way that wasn't oppressive. For the first time in months, Ethan breathed freely. The stillness wasn't absence, it was clarity. He spent the following weeks reclaiming the space. Locks changed, walls repainted, furniture rearranged. Not to erase her, but to build a home untouched by lies. Each morning, he brewed coffee and stood by the window, sunlight spilling across the counter. No second guessing. No anxiety. Only calm. Lila, meanwhile, faced the consequences of her choices. Suspended from work, isolated from colleagues, and cut off from Ryan, she moved into a modest apartment across town. Every message she wanted to send Ethan, apologies, confessions, regrets, remained unsent. Sometimes she drove past their old home, parked a block away, and watched him through the windows. He was calm, warm, unshakable. Something in him she could never reclaim. One morning, Ethan found a small envelope on the doorstep. No name, no return address. Inside, a note in her familiar handwriting. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what I destroyed. You were my calm, my home. I traded it for lies. Ethan folded it, placed it in a drawer. The words didn't sting. They were just echoes of a past he no longer needed to relive. Life moved on. On work sites, amidst the rhythm of drills and hammers, Ethan felt grounded again. The honest noise of labor reminded him what real life sounded like. One evening, in a quiet downtown cafe, he noticed a woman at the counter. A kind smile, natural presence. He returned the smile, brief and human. No bitterness, no expectation. Only possibility. Meanwhile, Lila began rebuilding her life slowly. She journaled, reflected, and started making choices rooted in honesty. The consequences of betrayal had left her with lessons she couldn't ignore. Weeks later, Ethan moved into a smaller house near the foothills. Surrounded by pine trees and open sky, he fixed things, volunteered, lived fully in a space untouched by deception. On a crisp morning, sunlight spilling over the mountains, he whispered to himself, "You made it through." Inside, he was free. And somewhere, miles away, Lila began writing the first page of a life she could finally face truthfully. Because betrayal had consequences, but so did living with honesty.